My name is Mary Hyatt, and I know that you have wandered onto my page maybe for the first time. And so I want to be the first one to welcome you. I just so honor your willingness to give me your time today and to show up. And my job, I am a life coach. I am a Blue Diamond wellness advocate with doTERRA. And my job is to help women wake up, to help them find their voice and to become fully alive. And so every single week on this show, I am going to explore different ideas that have to do with authenticity, vulnerability, self-discovery, coming back to yourself and really living a life that you are able to create from a place of passion, from a place of desire, and live your best life. So this is so fun for me. I love doing this every single week. And this week we are getting into talking about intimacy. Now, intimacy is one of those things that can be a really tricky topic. Oftentimes when we hear the word intimacy, we have, just different feelings about it, whether that's, triggering and it's negative, or whether we are already in a intimate place in our lives with ourselves and with people who we love. And so it brings up a lot of warm feelings and fondness. And this has been a journey for me, learning what it looks like to be intimate. And I just kind of want to share a little bit of my story for those of you who don't know me very well. So I was married for 10 years to a wonderful person who I really respect and honor. And it obviously got to the place where we realized it wasn't something that we wanted to continue with, and all kinds of backstory there, but not important to go into. But I got married really young. So I'm 31 years old. I got married at the age of 20. And I realize now that nobody talked to me about intimacy. Nobody taught me what intimacy was, what it looked like. How do you cultivate it? How do you create it? And so I feel like for those 10 years of my marriage, it was like flying solo. It was in the dark, and you're trying to connect. And the connection for my ex-husband and I was good. And we got along, and, those elements were there, and we respected each other. But now looking back over it, I realized there was a massive lack of intimacy, and I felt that intuitively, and I didn't know how to vocalize it then. And now I'm able to put some words to what I was feeling. And so I kind of, as you do, as you're trying to understand what went wrong and what's going on, it's like, okay, well, why didn't we have intimacy? Was that his fault? Was that my fault? Who's to blame? Then I have all this self-shame of, oh my gosh, this was my issue. And what I realized is that intimacy is something that you can't earn. It's something that you create. It's something that you cultivate. And so we're going to get into this topic today. We're going to talk about what is intimacy. We're going to ask some difficult questions and kind of get into it. So as a coach and a business consultant, one of my favorite things to do is to ask the tough questions, not only to my clients, but to myself, so that we can get to a better place of understanding what motivates us, where our blocks are, what keeps us stuck. And it's all in the brain. It's all in our mental state and the thoughts that we think. And so I'm going to get into that. And then we're going to talk about a few ways to actually cultivate more intimacy in your relationship. So if you are in a marriage, if you're married to a spouse, would you just comment number 1? So in the comment section, just type in a number 1 if you're married. If you are dating somebody, would you type in a number 2? And if you are single, type in a number 3. So I just kind of want to gauge where you guys are, because this is content that is applicable to any of those stages of life, whether you find yourself in a space of being married, of being in a place where you're dating somebody who may or may not end up, being your partner for life, or if you find yourself single. Okay, so we've got some 2s, people that are dating, a lot of people that are married. Megan, you said you're number 3. So this is going to be great, because what I love about this discussion is intimacy is not something that can only be found within a long committed relationship. Intimacy is something we can find in friendships. We can certainly find an intimate relationship even with ourselves. So let me ask you this question. How would you rate your level of intimacy? So if you are at a space where you are either dating somebody or you're married, Rate yourself on a 1 to a 10. So 1 being you have absolutely no intimacy, you cannot talk, you can't communicate, there's a real lack of that, a lack of trust, a lack of honesty. And then a number 10 is you have complete intimacy. You know, your partner gets you, they get, you get them, and it's just this beautiful, intimate partnership. So a couple questions you can ask to kind of gauge where you are in this scale is, can you be completely honest in your relationship? So these are kind of gauges of intimacy. Can you be completely honest in your relationship? Can you ask for what you need? Are you able to vocalize your needs and your wants? Can you share your fears? Is that something that is easily welcomed in the environment of your relationship? Is there a mutual empathy? You know, are you really coming from a place of understanding with each other? Is there reciprocal sharing? You know, sometimes in relationships, there's one person that's dominantly sharing and another person that is usually the listener. And so is there sort of this reciprocal relationship of sharing? Do you feel that there is an actual connection? Like a real, genuine connection where you feel understood, you feel seen, you feel heard. So now kind of hearing that, and you guys are giving me some great answers, and this is totally the space to be absolutely honest. One of the things that I pride myself on and I really try to create is a intimate space. Even when we are here online, it's like, okay, let's get to a place where we can be vulnerable and share our stuff. So how did you rate yourself? We've got a 6.5, 9, 7, 6, 8. And obviously you guys are here because you're wanting to understand about intimacy and you're wanting to create more of it within your relationships and within your life. Now, one question that I love to ask that I kind of use as a coaching technique with my clients is I'll say, answer the following question. I am not allowed to be ... I am not allowed to be. And so when you're thinking about your relationship, oftentimes we curate what we show somebody. We decide what versions of ourselves that we're going to show. We're going to decide how vulnerable we're going to be. And when you begin to hide parts of who you are, and you start to kind of mold yourself into the specific version for somebody, and create kind of a version of yourself that where you're not allowed to be vulnerable, you're not allowed to show emotion, you're not allowed to ask for what you want, you're not allowed to XYZ, you can be really positive that there's an element here of a lack of intimacy. So when you feel like there's some part of yourself that you can't bring to the table, you can't bring forward, then that is a lack of intimacy. And so this is just kind of gauging. There's no judgment here. It's not like, oh my gosh, now you need to get divorced or anything like that. It's just gauging where you are with your partner or even where you are with yourself. So one of the questions that I would even ask you beyond that is, you know, what kind of intimacy are you lacking? If you could give voice to what it is that you want more of in the way of intimacy, what would that voice say? You know, I want more of ... What is it that you really feel like in the realm of intimacy you're lacking? And if you are at a place where you can be honest and share that, I would so love that in the comments. One of the best parts about Facebook Live as opposed to a podcast is that we get to interact and I get some awesome instant feedback from y'all. So if you want to ask yourself that question and put it in the comment section, that would be great. What is it that you are lacking? What kind of intimacy? What is it that you're really looking for? What kind of connection do you want more of? And I think there's such power in vocalizing those things. You know, once we can get honest about where we are in kind of seeing where our level of intimacy is and what it is that we would want to cultivate, what it is that we want more of, it gives us the opportunity to go in, to take responsibility for that outcome and make some significant changes. So Tina, thank you so much for commenting. You said true romance. So appreciate that. I think that that's really common. A lot of the clients that I work with, I'm working with on these issues of intimacy, as well as issues within their bodies. And oftentimes, if not always, marriage comes up. Relationships come up, friendships come up, and we are talking about the lack of intimacy and what it is that they would really want more of. And oftentimes it's the first time that they feel like they can even vocalize that. out loud, that they can even say, I do want more of something, and not that means you have to leave. It means you get to go and figure out a creative way to create more of that. And so then from there, I think that the most important question that you can ask yourself, if you're thinking, okay, what am I lacking? What is it that I want more of? Then asking yourself this next question: how intimate are you with yourself? Now, that's kind of a crazy question, because oftentimes when we think about intimacy, we think of it with another person. I have to be intimate with this person. But if everything that we do stems from the relationship that we have with ourselves, and if we can't have intimacy with ourselves, we can't have that with other people. How intimate are you with yourself? If you want more honesty in your relationship with another person, asking yourself, do you tell yourself the truth? Are you honest with yourself? If you want to spend more time with somebody, you can begin to ask yourself, do I spend enough time with myself? Am I intimate with myself? Do you listen to yourself? Is that something that you, when you have that intuition come up, you squash it down immediately? Do you spend some time journaling and hearing what it is that spirit voice inside of you is saying? That true essence of who you are. What is that part of yourself communicating, and are you listening? Do you nurture yourself? What does that look like? Are you somebody who, if you want more nurturing in your relationships, are you nurturing yourself? Are you taking care of yourself? And, when you think about intimacy, one of the reasons why we shy away from intimacy, and you guys know this, we all experience this, we all feel this, certainly I do. One of the reasons that we shy away from it is because we risk rejection. Like, if we try to intimately connect with somebody, then we risk the chance to be completely rejected. And there's wounding there. I know that my past, there's a lot of wounding. When I tried to step into a place of intimacy, it was rejected. And that is the only way into intimacy. Vulnerability is the key to intimacy. Without it, intimacy can't exist. And that's something that has been a massive learning for me, coming from a place of moving out of this divorce, getting divorced, looking at my past relationship with my ex-husband for a decade. It was like, oh my God, we lacked so much intimacy because I was unwilling to be vulnerable. I was unwilling to do that. And vulnerability is the courage to be yourself. I want to say that again. Vulnerability is the courage to be yourself fully, to show up with all of your strengths, all of your weaknesses, and be willing to be seen, to be known, and know that nothing of who you are, if you bring it to the table, your full self, could lose love, and there's nothing that you could bring that can earn love. That your love for yourself, the love that you're given from God, from your higher power, whatever that looks like, is unconditional. It's not conditioned on who you are and what you've done. It is a birthright to have love. And so this is really powerful when you're thinking about intimacy, is when you can come as a full human being, your true authentic self, it shifts. So like I said, in my previous marriage, I was scared to death because of previous relationships. I was scared to death to be truly vulnerable. I would let him see some sides of me, but not others. I felt like I did not have a voice, and that's on me. I felt like I did not have a voice. I felt like I couldn't communicate my needs properly. I felt like I wasn't able to vocalize some of my wants and some of the ways that I was unhappy. And so it didn't feel safe to me. I couldn't trust that experience, and I wasn't even willing to try it. I didn't have the awareness at the time that this was going on. It was all kind of happening subconsciously, and I was just not showing up authentically. And so I can remember I was pretty unemotional at the time. If you know me now, I cry, I feel like all the time. I'm very much fully alive. I feel the range of emotions. But during my marriage, I was not. I was very shut down emotionally. I was, 70 pounds heavier than I am now. Everything was on lockdown, shut down, survival. And so for me, I can remember the times that I did cry, the few times that I finally would let myself be vulnerable enough to cry in front of him. I would cover my face and I would be like weeping and I would cover my face. I was existing in such a place of shame. I was existing in such a place where I was terrified to really be seen. And I can remember when I got out of my marriage and I was dating some people. I was dating this wonderful man, and I remember I was sitting on his lap, and I started to cry about something. It was a very vulnerable moment, and I started to cry, and I covered my face again. It was my habit to cover my face. Don't see me. Don't see the real me. I'm embarrassed. There's shame here. And he looked at me, and he pulled my hands down from my face, and he looked at me straight in the eye, and I'm talk about vulnerable. I was like, for the first time, I'm being seen in all my yuckiness. And he said, don't hide. You don't have to hide. And of course, as you can imagine, I'm like, weeping even more. And that was an incredibly intimate moment. But what was required in that moment to create that intimacy was that I allowed myself to be seen in my ickiness, in a place where I was not at my best, where I was being kind of living in my fears. I allowed myself to be seen in that moment. It was a powerful moment. And so now, and I'm so grateful to this man, now, every time that I cry, every time that I find myself getting emotional, whether it's in public, whether it's in private, I allow myself to be seen in that vulnerable position. And so the degree of intimacy that you can have is the degree to which you're able to be authentic. You cannot love from a place of being fake or to be a certain version of yourself. Like, I can't love you if you're not showing up as you, because then I'm just loving a facade. And then there's no intimacy. There's some kind of a wall there. But when I can show up as my true self, all of my strengths, all of my weaknesses, and I can trust that can be held, loved, and accepted, and even if it's not by another person, that I'm still held, loved, and prized, by God, by the universe, however you look at it, that it's not about another person. I know in my essence and my being that I am enough and that I am lovable. But I can show up with that confidence, then we can partake in this intimacy. And so there's really no intimacy without authenticity. And that was a big aha moment for me. And so what I love about intimacy, you can't earn intimacy. Like I said before, you cannot earn it. You have to cultivate it over time. You have to show up as your true self. You've got to do the work. And when we are stuck in our hiding, we cannot truly connect. So I want to talk about some of these issues that I feel like, where does intimacy stem from? Where does it come from? And if you guys have questions or if you have comments as we're going through this, let's talk about it. Let's get into it. But I really think that intimacy begins to stem from, ultimately, self-love. So we can only love others to the degree that we love ourselves. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar, I know most of you are, with Maya Angelou. She is one of my role models in life. She's somebody that I really look up to, and I keep coming back to her words. They're just incredibly powerful. And something that she said, I don't trust people who don't love themselves and tell me I love you. There is an African saying which is, be careful when a naked person offers you a shirt. Whoa. That, I feel like, is just such an amazing quote. I'm going to read it again. I don't trust people who don't love themselves and tell me I love you. There is an African saying which is, be careful when a naked person offers you a shirt. Our love for ourselves cannot be conditional. We cannot earn our own love. Because if we believe in a conditional love for ourselves, and we have to earn our own love, we have to do certain things that make us more lovable, then we're going to translate that into our relationships. Then all of a sudden our love for others is conditional. If we have judgments towards ourselves, that gets translated into our relationships. Then we're going to have judgments towards other people. And so it starts, this kind of intimacy, it stems from self-love. The more we can love ourselves, the more that we can accept ourselves, the more that we know when we show up authentically, we are so perfect as we are, loved in all of our messy ickiness, It doesn't change the fact that we're lovable. Then we can connect. Then we can then we can create this kind of intimacy. So it starts with self-love. Now, it also stems from trust. So one of the questions to ask yourself is this a safe space? Am I cultivating trust? Am I showing up in integrity and doing the things that cultivate trust? Am I making it okay for somebody to ask something of me and then I respond and I do it for them? Am I in my relationships creating trust? Intimacy stems out of a place of trust. If there's no trust, if the safety isn't there, intimacy is not going to be found. All right, so that's kind of the second place that intimacy stems from. And then this is a big one for me. This has been a huge learning curve for me, and this is honesty. I would say that most of my life, until probably, 3 years ago, I was unwilling to be honest to myself and to other people. When I was growing up as a little girl, if I had needs that I wanted, I lied all the time, y'all, to get out of things. I didn't feel like it was safe to say, I don't want to do this, or I'm too tired, or I need some space. So I would just make up excuses, and I would either lie that I was sick, I would just straight up lie that I had something else to do, or that, oh, I didn't see your text, or whatever it was, because I didn't feel that safety to vocalize some boundaries. And so for my life, I never had intimate relationships because I wasn't being honest with my needs, with my desires, with my wants. And intimacy has to come from a place of honesty where you can admit where you are currently, and you can admit what it is that you want and really what it is that you need. That's a huge thing for me. I'm learning how to ask for what I need and realize that can be okay. Can I get an amen on that? I feel like that is a big one that is just, it is kicking my ass right now. But it is something that I am now so committed to practicing is honesty. Being honest with where I am is huge. And the last place that intimacy stems from is understanding, a place of non-judgment. So you can't have intimacy if you don't have this space of kind of a judgment-free zone, a space that starts with understanding. It starts with empathy. We talked about this sort of reciprocal empathy where I can look at you and you can tell me something and I can really, even though if that never makes sense to me and I think like, I would never do that, or I could never act or behave in that way. I'm going to start with understanding. So you guys hopefully were on with me last week when Nick Hendricks was with me when we were talking about the goo. And one of my favorite sayings from Nick that has transformed my life is he says, everyone has a great reason for doing what they do. Everyone has a great reason for doing what they do. So this intimacy has to stem from a place of understanding. I'm willing to understand how it is you got to where you are, even if it's different than what I would do, or even if it's something that I don't even agree with. I'm going to commit to a space of understanding. Okay, so that's how it kind of stems from. It stems from self-love, from trust, from honesty, and from understanding. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard this little saying. I heard it the other day, and I shared it with my friend, and she was like, yeah, everybody knows that. But I thought, this is so clever that I'm going to share this with you. So if you've already heard it, take one for the team and don't tell me. But intimacy, if you slow it down, into me I see. Into me I see. So intimacy has to stem from self-knowledge and from a place of authenticity. So if you are lacking intimacy, it's because you're lacking that awareness, that relationship with yourself. And so it has to stem from a place of authenticity. So intimacy, into me I see. When we can be truly intimate, it's because we know ourselves, we're willing to show up as ourselves, and we love ourselves. And that somebody's reaction to us isn't going to change any of that. That's when we can really come to a place of powerful, powerful intimacy. And So Brene Brown, if you guys aren't familiar with the author and scientist Brene Brown, please, 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 please check her out. She is like an absolute expert in this area. And so in her book called Daring Greatly, she says, when we're able to cultivate intimacy, when we allow our most vulnerable and powerful selves to be deeply seen and known, and when we honor the spiritual connection that grows from that offering with trust, respect, kindness, and affection, that's when we can cultivate intimacy. So it's when we're able to be vulnerable and to be fully seen as our weak selves and our powerful selves. Sometimes it's even more vulnerable to show up in our strength than it is even in our weakness. And so that's a really powerful place, because when we lack intimacy, I believe that that is a basic human desire and need. It's a sense of intimacy and belonging. And so when we don't have that, what happens is that we find ways to cope. We find ways to numb. We find ways to buffer. And so, for example, if you end up coping through eating, you're going to begin to eat to fill yourself up and to feel like you're taken care of. You might begin to shop to remind yourself that you're worthy of a little spoiling. You might start searching social media to create some kind of sense of connection, which oftentimes ends up backfiring and you don't have that sense of belonging. Maybe your go-to is drinking, so that you can forget that you are lonely, or that you are at a place where you feel unhappy and that you want more. And so the list goes on in ways in which we cope and we numb and we buffer because we don't have this intimacy. And what's crazy is, so when you feel like you can't be vulnerable and you numb, this is a quote from Brene that I just think is so powerful. Here's what she says about this. She said, numbing vulnerability is especially debilitating because it doesn't just deaden the pain of our difficult experiences. Numbing vulnerability also dulls our experiences of love, joy, belonging, creativity, and empathy. We cannot selectively numb our emotions. Numb the dark and you numb the light. So when we numb our vulnerability, when we numb the need to share and to show up as ourselves, we also, and that can feel very painful and very scary and it risks rejection. But when we shut that down, when we numb that and we begin drinking, eating, shopping, overworking, oversexing, social media, whatever, then we also numb joy and love and belonging and happiness. We cannot selectively numb. We're going to numb both. And so showing up in a range of emotions as our authentic self opens the door for this true intimacy. And I know, I can say this without a shadow of a doubt, that my relationship absolutely lacked that. And I'm in a relationship now with a wonderful man who I love with all of my heart. He's so amazing. I have never experienced a more intimate relationship. I'm like, holy cow. And y'all, it is deep. I mean, we are so intimately connected, but we have a place where we can be fully honest. We started our relationship where I said, listen, it's our second date, okay? I said, listen, Bentley, I've got some skeletons in the closet that I need to share with you. And it was the first time that I had dated somebody that I was willing to be honest and share that. One of which was that I was, 70 pounds heavier. And my fear, of course, in sharing that is this person's going to look at me and say, well, if you were really overweight once before, you're going to be overweight again. I don't want to deal with that. And I'm out. And so I remember we were sitting down and I shared with him these couple secrets, if you will, these skeletons in my closet that I was sure that were going to be deal breakers. And I shared them with him and he goes, okay. And I was like, okay. And he's like, okay. Anything else? And I'm like, whoosh. It was so scary to share that. And he met that with just kind of almost this nonchalant, like, all right, no big deal. And from that point on, I was like, I can tell this man anything. And he's not going to look at me like I'm crazy. He's going to be able to hold the space for me. And that was incredibly powerful. And I feel like we're at this space where we are truly honest with each other. We don't keep any secrets. We share our fears. We share our dreams. We share what scares the hell out of us. We share how our days have been hard, how they've been great. We pray for each other. It's just a really beautiful space. And sometimes we just sit in silence together. And sometimes that can be the most intimate of all. So let's talk about 4 ways to actually create intimacy. So if you're hearing this and you're going, okay, yeah, I may rate myself as a 6, but reality is I'm not showing up as my authentic self. So there's a level of intimacy that's not present in my relationship, and I want more of it. I want to see how good it can get. That's my theme for this year, is let's see how good it can get. We're not made to live in misery. We're not made to sit in relationships that are dead. We are in every area of our life. And my belief is, and why I've committed my entire life to this, is our purpose is to be fully alive. Like, that is the biggest compliment to God, is to be fully alive, to be fully in love, and to recognize who we are is love, to be able to be in a space of generosity and overflowing, even when it is tough, even when it is unbelievably challenging, even when we're in the midst of even trauma. How good can it get? So let's see if there's a way where we can create and cultivate even more intimacy in our relationships. Now, you can even apply this to your friendships. So if it's not, if you're one of the people that answered that you were single, this is still good, and I know that it will help even in future relationships. So the first way to create more intimacy is to create a safe space. One of the things that I think is really cool in a relationship is, number one, not assuming that somebody is responsible for handling all your stuff. So one of the questions to ask your partner, or even friend for that matter, is, hey, I'm feeling some stuff right now that I would love to share with you. Can you hold this space for me right now? Which means that the other person is in a space where they can listen and be present. Can you hold the space for me? And I love that question, because it's almost like you're asking permission before you're walking in and just like emotionally vomiting, and the person's not ready. They end up inadvertently kind of rejecting you and wounding you because they're not in a space to handle it. This is a great opportunity to ask, like, hey, like, can you hold this for me right now? Do you have space to talk about something for a second? And if the other person's like, yeah, it's like, okay, they've agreed to it. They are having some control over it, and they're showing up. So that's the first thing. To create a safe space, you have to ask permission for the other person. But for ourselves, to create a safe space for the people that are coming to us in their vulnerability, we have to create a non-judgmental place. And like I said, it's got to come from a place of understanding, so that you are not having some kind of agenda on the conversation. That you say, whatever comes up is going to come up. I'm going to work on breathing through this, so that if I get triggered, I kind of just check in with myself and continue to hold the space for somebody. I'm going to choose to not judge. And judgment is easy. It's our default is to judge. Well, I wouldn't do that. I'd do something different. So getting to the place where we can go, okay, what would it look like if I could just hold this for them without any judgment, without comparison, and I can just hear them? Okay, so that's the first, is really to create a safe, non-judgmental space. Now, the second way to create more intimacy is to be present. Now, this should be a given, but so often when somebody comes to us in their vulnerability, we're so distracted. We're on our phones, we're on our computers, we are reading a book, and we don't set it down to show up and to be present. This is getting harder and harder. It's like, sometimes if I'm at dinner with some of my friends, and I love like doing social media and capturing the moment, and there'll be some times where it's like, okay, we just need to be present. So we all put our phones down and we agree that we don't check them during the duration of our meal, so that we can really be present with each other. And when we are in a space of intimacy, we have to be present. If we're distracted, it breaks that connection. And sometimes intimacy is completely nonverbal. I think oftentimes we think, okay, well, intimacy is all about talking through our emotions and our feelings, and sometimes that is intimidating for people. And so intimacy can sometimes be in the silent. Oftentimes intimacy is, it looks a lot like just being, existing, being present, just being there. And sometimes it is intimacy through our bodies. We can create intimacy through holding hands, from, having sex, from a touch on the shoulders, a wink, a smile. It's sometimes a gesture. So oftentimes being present isn't even about the verbal communication. It's just being there fully without any distraction. So to cultivate and to create more intimacy, we have to be present. And like I said, that seems obvious, but so often it's like a very easy thing, but we miss it. And then we don't create more of that. Now, the third way to create more intimacy is to practice listening. I love this one. There's really an art to listening. And we have to be in a space, again, where we're not judgmental. We're not trying to fix anything. That we really believe at the end of the day that the person that we are holding the space for is fully resourceful, fully capable. We're not here to save them. We're not here to fix them. We can hold the space and simply listen. It's not about giving advice. It's not about finding the solution. It's just listening. And what kind of breaks this connection of listening, I have found, are three things. Wanting, aversion, or neutrality. Okay, so if you're in a state of listening and your friend or your partner is sharing something with you and you want something from the conversation, you want a specific outcome, you want them to have a realization, you want them to feel bad about themselves, you want them to change a behavior, you can't be in a space of truly listening because your mind is fixated on what it is that you want. So you might ask questions that lead somebody to some space that gets you what you want. You might have a lack of empathy or compassion or understanding when you're in a space of wanting. So we have to remove the wanting, remove the attachment, and just show up for the other person. The second kind of way that we can break this connection is by aversion, which, guys, hello, this is usually the case when somebody comes to you in their vulnerability and they might be sharing that they want something different out of the relationship, that they're not being fulfilled in some manner. Our first instinct is to be, reactive, to resist what it is that they're saying. Well, that's not me. And you have an aversion to what they're saying. You get triggered and everything goes into protection mode. So when you're in that mode, you cannot have intimacy. You're not really in the space of listening because it's all about you at this point and basically protecting yourself. And you end up saying things that you wished you wouldn't have said because you're acting from a place of wounding. You're afraid of rejection. So you have this aversion to what the other person is saying. And the third way that you can kind of break this connection when you're listening is neutrality. And this is kind of the silent killer, because when you're in a place of just being neutral, you don't care. You don't care. You literally are probably thinking about other things. You're mentally checked out. You kind of probably think on some level it's a waste of your time, and you're not really there. You're not really listening. It's kind of like, And you guys know how sucky that feels. When somebody is just not engaged with you, just energetically, you can feel it. And so neutrality is kind of that silent killer to this connection. So the third way to create more intimacy is to practice this art of listening. Okay, the fourth and final way to create more intimacy. And guys, if you have questions or thoughts, go ahead and shout them out in the comment section because I love talking about this. The fourth way is to embrace vulnerability. There is no way around this. To create more intimacy, we have to risk being seen. We have to remove our hands off of our eyes, and we have to risk being seen. We can't create it without that. And vulnerability is a practice. The book that I suggest reading, if you want to learn how to get better at vulnerability, is this book by Brene Brown, Daring Greatly. Love, love, love this book. And this is all about vulnerability. It is fascinating. I was thumbing through it this morning and I'm like, God, I need to read that again. It's just so good. If you've read this, let me know in the comment section. Tell me that you loved it. It's just such a fantastic, fantastic book. But intimacy and vulnerability is something that, you're not going to have with every person. That's something that I think is really important, is that people have to earn the right to have you show up in vulnerability. There has to be that trust. There has to be that honesty. And it's not anything that we can demand of our friends or our partners either. It's something that has to be cultivated, and it starts with ourselves. And sometimes it's not reciprocal at first. Maybe you're sharing and you're stepping out in this space first before your partner is willing to share. But it's not dependent on them. It's not like you have to sit down and tell me how you feel. Babe, tell me how you feel. I want to know. What are you feeling? And they're like, nothing. But Mary said that you're going to feel something. We need to be vulnerable. We need to have more intimacy. So tell me. It's like, and so it's like that's going to break intimacy as well. We have to respect other people and their boundaries first and foremost. We cannot demand that somebody open up. This is our own practice. Intimacy, vulnerability is our own practice. When we can show up as our true selves, it shifts the relationship. But it's the work that we do for ourselves. So it's our journey to show up as ourselves, to do our own work, and ultimately, if nothing else, hold the space if and when our partners want to share anything. And you can even say little things like, well, how did that make you feel? Or, oh gosh, like I can see you're agitated. Is there anything that you want to tell me? Like I can totally handle it right now. And you got to make sure you're at that space where you're not going to be coming from a place of wanting aversion or neutrality. And intimacy too, this is something that I want to make sure to point out too, that intimacy is not sharing everything. That kind of kills desire. Like, why do people love the chase? We love the mystery. We love a little bit of the unknown. And so this isn't about sharing absolutely everything. There's some things that you're going to want to keep to yourself that aren't things that you're going to share with your partner or with your friends. And that's healthy. You kind of want there to be this level, this possibility of discovery, that there's something left to seek, in your partner. And so it's like, to me, intimacy is knowing when it matters to show up and to voice your needs and your wants and your fears and your dreams and your desires. But it's not going to be every single thought you have to share. It's not about the quantity of it. So when we look at intimacy, that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about the space of being vulnerable with ourselves, learning how to be more authentic with who we are so that we can share that with our partner. And so it requires authenticity, it requires vulnerability, and intimacy. When you have true intimacy, there's nothing like it in the world. I am blown away by intimacy. And I thought that I had a level of that. And I think I did. There was a mutual understanding, in my previous marriage. There was a mutual respect. We talked. But because I was unwilling to deal with my stuff and to show up as myself, we couldn't really connect. I wasn't ready for that. And now, because I've done so much work on myself and really come to a place of loving who I am and being really confident in that, I'm bringing a whole person to this relationship. And it's freaking amazing. I'm like, mine is blown every day. I'm like, this is love? Oh my God, this is intimacy? Whoa. I got to talk about this because this is incredible. It feels amazing. And so little by little, we are able to cultivate that, to create it between the people that are the closest in our lives. So guys, I hope this was useful today thinking about intimacy. I know that when I started to think around it, it was very much an aha moment for me. And it's something that I think we should talk more about and talk about it. So make sure to follow me on Instagram, Mary G. Hyatt. I share a lot on Insta Story, my thoughts, my little tidbits of wisdom every day. I'm sharing stuff. So make sure that you follow me there. Share this if you know people that would really benefit from talking about intimacy. And I will be on next week, Wednesday, 1 o'clock Central, and I'll be on 10 minutes early so you can hang out with me in the virtual green room. But I just want to say thank you for everybody who was willing to comment and to share, to be on with me live. If you're watching the recording, I'm so glad that you're taking the time out of your day to get into this topic. And if you have any other thoughts on intimacy, if you have books that you're reading that have been really helpful in this area, please share them with everybody below. I know that would be collectively really, really helpful. So guys, hope you have a fabulous rest of your day, and I will see you next week.